Okay, so are you ready to dive in? Today we're going to tackle this question, grifter or gifted?
Hmm.
With Robert Maxwell, media tycoon, and, oh yeah, father of Ghislaine Maxwell. This is going to be a fascinating one.
It sounds like it. You've got articles, legal cases. I even see a biography here. Determined to unravel the Maxwell mystery.
Yeah, Maxwell's life is a lesson in ambition, deception. Where do you draw the line between brilliance and just plain manipulation? Was he really a genius building an empire? Or was it all just a house of cards waiting to fall apart? Let's find out.
Well, you have to go back to the beginning. Born Jan Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hock in Czechoslovakia, his parents were impoverished, Yiddish-speaking, worlds away from the luxurious life he'd eventually build.
Quite the rags to riches story, huh? And then he escapes the Nazis at 16.
Yeah.
Joins the Czechoslovak army, then the British army, becomes Captain Ian Robert Maxwell.
Like a scene straight out of a movie. A complete transformation. He kept reinventing himself throughout his life. He even went so far as to commission an official biography, hagiography, really. Control, you see, it seems that was a key thing for him.
Okay, so we see ambition, a desire to control the narrative. But let's get to his business dealings. He buys the Mirror Group in 1984, becomes a media powerhouse.
Yeah.
But the articles say he was controlling, demanding. He even bugged his own offices. What do you make of that? Paranoia or a sign of something deeper?
It certainly raises questions. Protecting his empire? Or was it more deeper insecurities? Lots of successful people are driven by a fear of failing, that need to stay in control no matter what.
Shrewd businessman or just a control freak? Let's talk about his spending. This guy bought it all. Helicopter businesses, football clubs, even a construction company. Visionary diversification. Reckless overspending. What do you think?
Now that is the question, isn't it? Maxwell definitely had a knack for seeing opportunity, wasn't afraid of risk. But then there's the 1991 case, Bishopsgate Investment Management Ltd v. Maxwell. It's the second one, and it starts to reveal maybe a darker side.
Ah, yeah, the pension fund scandal. Accused of using pension funds to prop up his failing businesses. That crosses a line, wouldn't you say?
It does. And then you have the Macmillan Inc. v. Bishopsgate Investment Trust Plec case, the third one. It brings up all sorts of questions about his methods. Brilliant entrepreneur, con artist. Was he willing to exploit others to get ahead?
And then, of course, you have his death in 1991. Found dead off his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine. They said it was accidental drowning. But come on, the conspiracy theories. Suicide. Murder. The article, The Day the Captain Died, lists 5 theories. Chilling.
It's a mystery, another piece of the puzzle. His empire collapsing, a desperate act. Or was it something more sinister? This unexplained ending makes him even more fascinating, doesn't it?
Ambition, control issues, shady financial dealings, and a mysterious death. But wait, there's more. Ghislaine Maxwell, his daughter, follows a similar, shall we say, controversial path. Becomes entangled in the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Like father, like daughter.
The Maxwell's scandal and conspiracy definitely fits. What do you think? Did she inherit her father's manipulative tendencies, or was she a victim of circumstance?
This is getting really interesting. We got a man who built an empire, but maybe not so honestly. Did he have a real vision, or just insatiable greed?
It's the big question, isn't it? Was Robert Maxwell a true innovator who went too far, or a master manipulator who conned his way to the top?
Let's go back to his early life. We talked about the name change. What really drove that transformation to escape the Nazis as a teenager, that had to leave a mark, right?
Absolutely. Imagine, one minute you're selling trinkets on the streets of Bratislava, the next you're getting the Military Cross for bravery in World War II. It changes you.
Like a completely new identity, a new life. Did wartime, the danger, the survival instinct shape him into the ambitious, maybe even ruthless person he became?
Interesting theory. There was this incident, you see, during his military service. While he was in Berlin, accused of stealing from a British officer's mess, he was court-martialed but acquitted. Maybe an early warning sign.
So maybe those signs were always there. Speaking of, let's get to his start in publishing. Pergamon Press, the foundation of his empire.
Pergamon. That's where his entrepreneurial spirit really takes off. He saw a need for scientific journals, and he filled it. But even then, there were these whispers, allegations of plagiarism, questionable business practices.
So even in academia, a world that's all about integrity, there were questions about him. Was he always a grifter? Or did ambition just, overpower his morals?
The age-old question, does the end justify the means? Pergamon, though, did publish a really good science book, Principles of Optics.
Really? A textbook? That doesn't sound like a ruthless businessman.
See, that's what makes him so interesting. Contradictions everywhere. He could support real scientific breakthroughs while also being involved in shady business deals. Like, he thought the rules didn't apply to him.
Above the law, huh? Okay, let's talk about the Maxwell film, the BBC production. It gives us a look into his later years, especially at the Mirror Group.
This film, it shows a man obsessed with control. Bugging offices, spying on employees. He even had a thing about Rupert Murdoch, his rival, mentioned him constantly.
Obsessed. What was it? Fear? Insecurity?
A glimpse into his mind, maybe? A man who thrived on manipulation? There's this scene where he's reading Private Eye, the satirical magazine that was investigating his finances. He's angry, amused, all at the same time, almost like he enjoyed the attention.
Knew about the negative press and didn't care. Like, he was daring someone to expose him, confident he could outsmart them.
Always under scrutiny, criticism, lawsuits, and yet he thrived on it. Like, it was a game he had to win no matter what.
That's what makes visionaries and con artists so similar, isn't it? Unwavering belief in themselves, always pushing the boundaries. But Maxwell also presented himself as a philanthropist, donated to charities, championed causes, played the role of the people's champion.
Another part of his carefully crafted image. The charismatic leader, the self-made man, the survivor who beat the odds. Was he really giving back? Or just trying to make himself look good?
Let's not forget, this is the guy who, according to the Times, went on these crazy spending sprees. Helicopters, football clubs, even that yacht, named after his daughter no less, the Lady Ghislaine.
The contradictions are fascinating, aren't they? Funding research, helping famine relief efforts, and spending lavishly on himself. Was he trying to make a difference, or just buy respectability?
Like he was living multiple lives, different roles for different people. Who was the real Robert Maxwell? The philanthropist, the ruthless businessman, the paranoid control freak.
Maybe he was all of them. A complex individual driven by ambition, ego, maybe just a deep need for validation. And that's what makes his story so compelling, so hard to figure out.
Like he wanted to blur the lines between hero and villain, making us grapple with the contradictions, come to our own conclusion.
Exactly. This isn't just about a person from the past. It's about psychology, ambition, and the masks we wear to get what we want.
And to understand what he wanted, we have to look at his financial and legal problems, especially in those final years before his death. So let's talk money problems. Maxwell's empire looked successful, but it was built on debt. Always borrowing, buying, juggling, just staying one step ahead.
A high-wire act, you could say.
Bah.
Money Week said he survived on publicity, projecting an image of wealth, when the reality was much different.
So faking till you make it. Create the illusion of success to attract more investors. Keep the whole thing going.
Exactly. But it started to fall apart in the late 80s. The economy was changing. His strategy of buying up everything, it started to backfire.
Macmillan, the American publisher, he paid way too much for that. A gamble that didn't work out right.
A huge gamble, $2.6 billion, more than anyone thought it was worth. Risky, even for a seasoned businessman.
And this is all happening while those legal battles over the pension funds are going on. Talk about a perfect storm.
Exactly. The Bishopsgate case, the Macmillan Inc. case, they showed just how far Maxwell was willing to go, blurring those ethical lines.
He was using the pension funds to cover his losses, stealing from his own employees. That's not just bad business, it's a betrayal.
A huge betrayal. Hundreds of millions of pounds taken from those retirement funds. No wonder people felt betrayed. He went from respected figure to, well, a symbol of greed.
It's that classic hubris, right? Flying too close to the sun. Even the most powerful people can fall. But before we get to that, let's go back a bit. His personal life, his relationship with Ghislaine, what was that like?
From what you've gathered, it seems Robert Maxwell was, well, a complicated father. Demanding. His biographer calls him brash, bombastic, affectionate one minute, terrifying the next.
And Ghislaine was the youngest. Daddy's girl, right? Grew up with wealth, privilege, always by his side at those big events.
Yes. But there was tragedy, too. Ghislaine was very young when her brother Michael had that terrible car accident. The whole family was devastated, Ghislaine especially.
Her mother, Betty, said she stopped eating, showed signs of anorexia. Fussed over so much she became spoiled. Sounds like a recipe for a complex personality.
It does. Early trauma, a demanding father, pressure to live up to expectations, all played a part, I'm sure.
It's amazing how childhood experiences can stick with you. So Ghislaine was smart, ambitious, spoke several languages, wanted to make her father proud. She even worked for him at the Mirror Group, then went to New York to launch the European.
Yes. And during that time, early 90s, she became a big name in London society. The original Kit Kat Club. even a director at Oxford United Football Club.
What a life. And then everything changes in November 1991.
The day Robert Maxwell is found dead, his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, in the Canary Islands.
Officially, an accidental drowning. But the circumstances, still so mysterious. Suicide, murder. Even his biographer, in The Day the Captain Died, lays out 5 different theories.
The timing, it's suspicious, isn't it? His empire collapsing, maybe he chose that way out to
Yeah.
escape the consequences?
Or someone else got to him, someone who benefited from his death, like a spy movie. And the yacht being named after his daughter, that adds another layer, doesn't it?
It suggests a strong connection, father and daughter. And what did Ghislaine know? Was she involved? Or completely in the dark?
Questions that would stay with her. But before we get to Ghislaine's story, what happened after Robert's death? What about his empire? How did people react?
Chaos. His companies were drowning in debt more than anyone knew, the pension scandal unfolding. His sons, Kevin and Ian, were left trying to hold it all together.
They tried to save the Mirror Group, didn't they?
They did, but they had to file for bankruptcy just weeks later. Then they were charged with conspiracy to defraud the pension fund. Eventually acquitted, but imagine going through that. Losing your father, then facing the public and the courts.
And the public's reaction. Maxwell went from celebrated entrepreneur to, well, a villain, the face of corporate greed.
The media went wild. His financial problems, the missing pensions, all the investigations, his carefully built image destroyed.
It shows you how fragile reputation is, especially when you're in the public eye. Years to build, seconds to shatter.
And yet, even now, he's still controversial. Some people still see him as a visionary, a man who did great things despite his faults. Others, they see a con man who got what he deserved.
The big question, was he brilliant but flawed, someone who went too far? Or was he just a master manipulator, built his success on lies?
And it gets even more complicated when you consider Ghislaine. Her life and her own downfall seem tied to her father's legacy.
It's crazy, isn't it? The Maxwell name, all these years later, still in the headlines. And with Ghislaine's conviction, well, tied to one of the biggest scandals we've seen. Quite the legacy.
A tragic story for sure. Ghislaine from socialite to convicted sex trafficker, facing years in prison. It really shows you privilege doesn't protect you from consequences.
We talked about her being daddy's girl, always in Robert's shadow. It's like, after he died, she needed that same power, that influence. She had to find it somewhere.
And she found it, or at least thought she did, with Jeffrey Epstein. Wealthy, but a questionable reputation even then. Their relationship starts right after Robert dies. A vulnerable time for her, emotionally, financially.
Drawn to that familiar dynamic, someone to fill that void. But we know it came at a terrible price.
The sources you've got, they paint a dark picture of Epstein's world. Abuse, powerful people, and Ghislaine, it seems, helping to bring young girls into it.
It's hard to grasp the manipulation, the abuse. And for years, she denied everything, said she didn't know about his crimes.
But the more victims came forward, the evidence, the flight logs, photos, her denials, they didn't hold up. Remember those articles about the Kit Kat Club, her being involved with Oxford United? Right there, in Epstein's inner circle.
A twisted reflection of her life with Robert. Same social circles, same power. But this time, the stakes are much higher, and the consequences much worse.
Epstein's arrest in 2019, sex trafficking charges. It shook those elite circles, and then his death in prison, the suicide ruling, all eyes turned to Ghislaine.
And then she vanishes. Conspiracy theories everywhere. Was she running?
But they found her, July 2020, at that estate in New Hampshire. The trial, it was a media circus. The victims, so brave, sharing their stories. Ghislaine's role in it all.
Their testimonies were powerful. You really saw the human cost of this whole thing. The lives destroyed by Epstein and those who helped him.
The verdict was clear. Guilty on 5 of the 6 charges. Sex trafficking of a minor. 20 years in prison. A strong sentence reflecting the seriousness of the crimes.
So after all this, Robert and Ghislaine, what have we learned? What can we apply to other figures like them who straddle that line between visionary and con artist?
It's a reminder, isn't it? Look beyond the surface. The charm, the carefully built image. Both Robert and Ghislaine, they were masters of manipulation. Used it all to get what they wanted.
Ambition, without any ethics, any empathy, it can lead to terrible things. Robert, chasing wealth and power, destroyed himself in the end. Debt, betrayal. And Ghislaine, helping Epstein, shows how those with privilege can exploit others.
And it's about holding people accountable. For too long, people looked the other way with Epstein, protected themselves instead of speaking out.
Silence can be just as bad. We have to question, challenge those in power, make them answer for their actions.
So how do you tell the real innovators from the fakers? Look beyond the surface, their actions, motivations, how they treat others. Don't just be swayed by charm. Dig deeper. Ask tough questions. Be careful of anyone who seems too good to be true.
This deep dive into the Maxwells, wow. Ambition, deception, the dark side of power. Makes you think about human nature, how seductive wealth and influence can be.
But it leaves us with a question. In a world where the lines are blurred, how do we become better at spotting the difference between real progress and calculated manipulation? Something to think about as we navigate this complicated world.